A few years ago, the subject of today's video was considered the future of the Texas football program. He was a near 5-star recruit coming out of high school and was seen as the quarterback who could help save the Longhorns football program. His name was Hudson Card. Unfortunately, despite all the hype, he was not able to make it work at Texas and ultimately went down as a bust because he didn't play well and was replaced by Quinn Ewers. He decided to try to save his career by going up to Purdue, who recently had luck with Aiden O'Connell before him. Sadly, through 2 years at Purdue, Hudson Card has barely won any games, and has most recently gotten benched for a guy who was not highly rated at high school and played really well this past weekend against Illinois. Today we're going to talk about the rise and fall of Hudson Card. How did Hudson become a 5-star prodigy-like recruit to begin with, and why did he flame out at both Texas and Purdue? But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to Hudson Card. In order to understand how Card got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Growing up in the state of Texas, Hudson would battle it out in every sport and activity with his brother Weston, and this instilled with him the immeasurables in Card early on. Weston would go on to play for Texas State football a few years later, and Hudson was always above his age. Card was only a toddler when Vince Young led Texas to a 2005 national championship victory, but his brother was 12 and helped Hudson fall in love with the Texas Longhorns. Card was super athletic, hardworking, and determined, and the family decided to go all in on Hudson's football dreams. Card started working with a quarterback trainer when he was in just 7th grade, so when he made up his mind early on about wanting to play college football, he had a plan. The family eventually moved to Lake Travis, which is a town outside of Austin, and this came before his first year of high school, as the older siblings were out of the house at the time. Before he got there, Lake Travis High School's coach got an email about this Hudson kid, but at first, he was very skeptical. His coach said, quote, "This skinny kid, kind of a surfer boy look, shows up, and all of a sudden is winning all the races. I get those emails a lot when kids are moving in, and a lot of the times they don't necessarily tell the whole truth. But I would say on Hudson, he told the whole truth." As a sophomore, Card was the backup quarterback, so he played receiver, catching 69 passes for 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns. In the state championship game, he replaced Ohio State-bound quarterback Matthew Baldwin, but Hudson would throw 3 interceptions, and none of those balls ended up getting to Garrett Wilson. Baldwin went on to play for Ohio State and TCU before he retired due to an injury. In December of 2017, Card got his first high major offer from TCU, and a few weeks later, both Northwestern and Indiana would get in on Card. He got bigger offers from Baylor and Auburn in the early spring, and then he got a huge Texas offer at the Orange and White spring game, and this was huge for him. His junior season would make him a borderline 5-star prospect, as he threw for 3,500 yards with 50 touchdowns alongside 4 interceptions. On the ground, he ended up running for 619 yards and 9 scores, and apparently he threw a touchdown every 7.4 attempts, and that is in the highest level of Texas high school football. He eventually committed to Coach Tom Herman in Texas, saying, quote, "It's been my dream school my whole life, so that was a big reason. I might as well focus on high school and winning a state championship since I knew where I wanted to end up. It feels good to get it out of the way and off my chest." Card held offers from 21 Division I programs, including Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan, but chose the Longhorns at the end of the day. He'd also become the 9th consecutive Lake Travis High School quarterback to go to a D1 program. You had Todd Reesing, Garrett Gilbert, Michael Brewer, Baker Mayfield, Dominic DeLira, Charlie Brewer, and Matthew Baldwin. This was quite the legacy, and he would have a lot of pressure on him to succeed. Hudson's dad could not believe his son was going to play for Texas, saying, quote, "It kind of freaks you out a little bit. I've gone into DKR several times, and I can't even imagine my kid running out of that tunnel as the starting quarterback. I'm barely going to make it." Hudson would establish himself as the number 2 dual-threat quarterback in the class of 2020, and this was a huge get for Texas. According to 24/7 Sports, Card was a 4-star recruit, the number 2 dual-threat quarterback, and the 59th best player in the class of 2020. So how would the Lake Travis Longhorn star do at his favorite school? Well, let's take a look. So when Card would arrive at Texas, he was seen as the next big thing, but there would be some quarterback talent in the room. He had Sam Ehlinger, Roschon Johnson, and Jaquindon Jackson all on the team, but there was a lot of praise for young Hudson. Sam Ehlinger said, quote, "Hudson is just a special player. There's really no other way to put it. He came out of the womb spinning the ball." So obviously Card would play very little in his freshman year, as he'd appear in both the UTEP and Colorado games, but that was about it. Going into 2021, he would battle it out with Casey Thompson, and Card would ultimately get the start in week 1. Against Louisiana, he'd throw for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also ran for 1 more. Sadly though, he would struggle horrifically against Arkansas, and all of a sudden, he ended up finding himself as the backup to Thompson. He'd play a little bit in their games against Iowa State and West Virginia, but in total he would appear in 7 games, throwing for 590 yards with 5 touchdowns and 1 interception. His freshman year would not go according to plan, and in 2022 he really wouldn't get all that much better. He was now the backup quarterback to Quinn Ewers, and behind him, Card would end up seeing ample time in 4 games, as he had to come in and try to play rescue against Bama, and then he ended up leading them to wins against UTSA and West Virginia, but lost in overtime to Texas Tech. In total, Card threw for 928 yards with 6 touchdowns and 1 interception. His 3 years in Texas were seen as very disappointing, as he ended up starting in 2021 but could not end up keeping the job, and then was more of a relief guy. Still though, many really liked him because he was a tough backup who loved the school, but it was time for him to move on. In total, while he was at Texas, he had passed for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns, but now at Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning taking over on the roster, he'd be the odd man out. He ended up deciding to transfer to Purdue, and he chose the Boilermakers apparently over Georgia, Alabama, and Notre Dame. Honestly, I don't really know if any of those schools wanted him to start, as they probably saw him more as an insurance policy than a starter. I mean, I guarantee it. He ended up choosing Ryan Walters in Purdue, and he ended up becoming the guy right away. While many Purdue fans wanted Brady Allen to be the guy, he ended up transferring away to Louisville, and now all of a sudden Card was tasked with rebuilding a Purdue team and continuing what Aiden O'Connell had just built. In his first year as a starter in West Lafayette, Card would throw 2 touchdowns in their Week 1 game against Fresno State, but they would lose at home to the Bulldogs, and this would set the tone for the season. He would lead them to a road victory against Virginia Tech, but besides that, it was tough sledding. He threw 2 interceptions without a touchdown against Wisconsin, struggled terribly at home against Iowa, didn't do anything against Ohio State, was terrible against Nebraska, was limited against Michigan, but would have 2 games at the end of the year. He had 4 touchdowns in a win over Minnesota, and then 4 touchdowns in a win over their arch rival Indiana in the Oak and Bucket game. In total, Card would finish with 2,300 yards with 15 touchdowns and 8 picks, and 5 more scores on the ground. Card would decide to come back for his final year of eligibility, and despite Purdue having a terrible season, Card was hopefully going to turn it around, and it looked like that'd be the case in Week 1. Against FCS level Indiana State from just about an hour away in Terre Haute, he'd end up going 24 of 25 for 273 yards and 4 touchdowns. Hudson Card played a near perfect game against the Sycamores, but that would be the height of his career, and since then, he has been awful. Against number 18 Notre Dame, he'd go 11 of 24 for 124 yards with a touchdown and 2 interceptions, and they would lose 66-7 at home against their rival. Things would not get any better in Week 3, as against Oregon State, he went 7 of 17 for 56 yards with a touchdown. Against Nebraska, he went 18 of 24 for 174 yards and an interception. And then in a terrible blowout loss to Wisconsin, he went 11 of 21 for 111 yards. So far in the year, his completion percentage has been below 50% in 3 of their last 4 games. He only has 738 yards through 5 games, has 4 interceptions, and was most recently listed as injured, but now he is benched. His backup quarterback Ryan Brown went crazy against Illinois and almost led them to a crazy comeback win, and Hudson Card's time at Purdue looks like it's going to be done unless Brown flames out or gets hurt. It's sad to see because at one point Card was the next big thing. Coming out of Lake Travis, he was seen as the next great Texas quarterback behind Sam Ehlinger, but he could never quite get it done there in Texas, got beat out by Quinn Ewers, and then at Purdue, he just couldn't figure it out. You can blame that partially on Graham Harrell, you can blame that partially on him, his receiver core hasn't been all that great, but overall, I just don't think Card is all that good. In my eyes, he was always pretty overrated and only really had 1 or 2 good games throughout his whole career, so this guy has never really been that impressive, but at the same time, he had all the physical tools necessary to be great. Maybe he'll get a chance at the end of the season, or maybe somehow he'll have an extra year of eligibility, but I don't think so. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, but for now it looks like the number 2 dual threat quarterback in the class of 2020 will go down as a bust. But what do you guys think? If you're a Purdue or Texas fan, why did Hudson Card end up becoming a bust? What went wrong for him at both Texas and Purdue? And what other players should I cover in my next video? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you're going to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.